Okay, Mr. Chairman, this broadcast is now live. Over to the Chairman of the Audit Committee, Councillor David Harries.
Thank you, and welcome to what may or may not be the last ever meeting of the South Northants Council Audit Committee. Welcome to everyone. We'll move on. Apologies for absence. Richard, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Chris Lofts, and Councillor Harold Davies is not present. We are quorate though.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Any member would like to declare an interest, other than a general interest, obviously, which we all have, in any of the items we're under discussion today? No? Okay, thank you. We'll move swiftly on to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 21st of January. Do you agree that they are correct record, and at some point I can sign them as a correct record? Some indicate. Thank you. All saying yes. Thank you very much. That's approved. Looking through them, I won't go them page by page because I think pretty much these items are covered on the agenda. So unless anyone has got something desperate that I've missed, we'll move on to Chairman's announcements, of which I have none. We'll come, I might mention some thank yous about how well we've been served by our officers, but I'll perhaps deal with that when we come to the summary of achievements item. That then brings us on to item 6, which is headed Statement of Accounts and Annual Government Statement 29/20. So Maria's going to explain why we're not looking at those. You better unmute yourself first, though.
I am unmuted. Thank you, Chairman. So you'll be aware that we've updated the committee a few times on the fact that we had completed the majority of our work. Your officers have provided everything that we'd wanted. The issue we've got is all about where you started, really, Chairman, in that we are having to do some work around the new organisations that are being formed across Northamptonshire. And as part of that, we have had to do a piece of work around the going concern. And we have to do that across all of the organisations, bringing everything together in order to come up with the appropriate disclosure that has to go into your financial statements. It's an unusual position, it's an unusual year, so it's taken quite a lot of work to get that together. That has to go through a professional panel review, and that is the process that is taking the time now. The last time we updated you as a committee, we were also waiting for the pensions information, but that has now come. So it is literally the going concern piece that we are waiting on. That's not something that's within my control or your officer's control. It is something now that we are just having to go through the process, the required process, to make sure the disclosures are correct. The reason for that is the standard's very, very clear on what's required for going concern. And there are just added complications with the fact that obviously the change from all of the individual councils moving into the 2 new authorities, and that's why it's taking longer.
I understand that. What I can't quite grasp, and I'm sure it's me, that is that if a going concern is mainly to do with the local government reorganisation and the transfer into West Northants, as far as we're concerned, how does that affect their accounts in 2019-20, which were passing the accounts on to South Northants Council again?
It's because the going concern assessment has to run from 12 months after when I sign the opinion, not the accounts date. So the standard requires, so if I sign the opinion today, it has to run to March 22. Now, clearly, as an organisation that won't be here in March 22, that's what's causing the technical issues. But the going concern assessment runs 12 months from the date of the auditor's signature, not the date of the accounts year or the balance sheet date.
A useful explanation. Thank you. Any members, any comments or questions? Stunned silence. Well, okay. Well, I think if you understand our frustrations, and I'm sure you're equally frustrated that here we are. We've battled through unpicking arrangements with Cherwell. We've battled through resolving, getting everything in order for the transfer to West Northants. We've battled through the pandemic, so we've had business as usual for pretty much everything, and now we find we can't sign off accounts through, well, I think, a technicality. Sandra, sorry, your hand's up there.
Thank you, Jim. I just think it's really quite sad in a way, isn't it? Because we can't have our final flourish. In other words, we're leaving with work undone. And if the accounts presumably are going to be, as I understand it, please correct me if I got it wrong, a special audit committee consisting of the chairman of the borough, Daventry, and ourselves, and about the county, for the future, that's fine. But will we be able to have a copy of the final accounts? Because I was hoping I would get you all to autograph it for me, Could probably have it on my coffin or something. But I just think it's a shame. And I just feel a bit sort of unfinished business.
Yes, I think we share that. We'll have to look at the practicalities and where we go from here. Tony, do you have a comment?
Thanks, Chairman. I feel just as frustrated because we've known about this for probably 18 months, definitely 12 months. So it should have been built in, but I guess we know where we are and we are where we are. But I don't think it should have happened.
No, well, as you say, we are where we are. So I think our role now is to consider how we deal with that. Denise, did you want to, I can't see you here. Yeah, there you are. Yes. Did you want to say anything? I mean, we're going to have to think how we play this. I mean, my preference, if it's at all possible, is for it to come to committee. But I'm thinking that's less and less likely. And so we're going to need to resolve legally how we deal with it. And it's got to be done within, well, obviously 2 or 3 weeks. So Denise, did you want to say anything, any background or comments?
Thank you, Chair. If we look for a committee and we look for that by the end of March, then we're looking, the latest date is probably the 30th of March, which is the Tuesday, to try and get that through. The notice days for those for the agenda is then the 22nd of March. So if we're looking for perhaps another 2 weeks between now and that date, that's got to be really quite tight to get that through. That would follow with the thing with the appendices coming as a to follow. I mean, we've still got to get those through by the 25th of March. So to try and get those in at that point is really, really tight timing. And it's whether that's going to be realistic or not.
Yeah, Richard, you can give us some guidance here.
Thank you, Chair. In the event that we were to publish appendices as to follow, we could publish those up to the start of the meeting. But to hold the meeting, it would be that single item of business. So we would have to have some kind of assurance that they were going to be ready by that point. If we were to have that meeting on the 30th of March, yes, we could publish an agenda with the appendices as to follow. But being the singular substantive item of business, we would need some assurances that they would be ready by the 30th. It's one for officers really, but that's just the technicality on what we can and can't do with supplementary information.
No, that's very useful. I just think that the other issue with that is I would not be happy to get the bulk of the papers on the day or even the day before, frankly. So we'd need some sort of leeway. And I think if I've understood you correctly, if we publish an agenda with a covering report on it, it's then we can't really cancel that meeting because it then legally exists. Is that right?
That is correct. If we were to publish an agenda and list the appendices as to follow, and those appendices subsequently didn't come forward, we would then be having a meeting to consider the covering report only, which would not be a great use of.
No,
Well,
we do not. Well, yes, we do not want to be in that position. Tony,
purpose.
yeah,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Putting my other chairman hat off, Chairman of the Council, do we not need to ratify all the meetings then through the full council? Or am I wrong on that?
Richard, do you want to advise on that?
No, that's why we have an audit committee for us to deal with the statement of accounts.
So it stands to one side of the full council then?
Effectively, it wouldn't need to go through an SNC full council as well. No.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, Councillor Barnes mentioned the interim arrangements, and I gathered that the interim arrangements for audit committee are that the chairman of the existing audit committees become the interim audit committee, but only to meet in exceptional circumstances. And my view, frankly, is I don't see any difference between doing that and leaving it to West Northamptonshire, because equally the other chairman comprising the audit committee would have absolutely no connection or idea about South Northamptonshire Council's accounts. So that seems to me to be quite unsatisfactory way of doing it. So but that's something we would perhaps need to consider. I mean, Maria, I mean, it's impossible for you to say, but I mean, could you say by the 22nd of March, or preferably before that, that we will have the papers in time to send out 2 or 3 days later? It's impossible.
No, I'm sorry, Chairman, I can't give that assurance. I've been pushing this for months now, and my aim was to have everything tied up for today, clearly. As I say, we've managed to push everything else. We managed to get the pension fund stuff through, but this isn't in my control. And that's why I can't give an assurance. If it was within my control, I would provide the assurances I could, but it's very hard to provide assurance on something that's not within your control, I'm afraid. No, and I'm not trying to be difficult in that at all.
No, you're absolutely not. I'm pretty sure I knew the answer before I asked the question, but I had to ask the question. Richard, were you going to?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say I'm not 100% sure on what the interim arrangements are for a shadow audit committee prior to or between vesting day and the inception of the following the election of the new councillors on the 6th of May. But if members would be happy for me to do so, I would be happy to clarify those interim arrangements and circulate those to members if need be.
Yes, thank you. Well, I know that there is a scope for an audit committee comprising the existing chairman, but I'm not sure if that's designed for, if there is such a thing, emergency audit matters. I'm not sure it's designed to sign off an account that could be signed off by the new authority. They clearly got to sign off the current year's account. So, I'm not sure it's any different or the value of doing it personally. Sandra, sorry, you.
No, it's right, Chairman. I can't really see any difference between the audit committee being allowed to meet our audit committee during April when the planning committee will be allowed to meet during April. And I think they've got a meeting scheduled.
We have.
So
yeah,
I can't see the difference between not allowing us, if you like, to sign off our own accounts. It just seems a bit daft.
Richard, you.
But then I know nothing.
Again, Mr. Chairman. Apologies, Councillor Barnes. Again, Mr. Chairman, something I can clarify if members would wish for me to do so as to whether or not that can be explored. I will certainly ask those questions if this committee would like me to.
Well, we'll have to decide where we go with this, but I don't think that's feasible. I think it's too late if it doesn't exist now in the system, it's too late to include it in the system. The interim arrangements have been agreed and approved, and I'm not sure that legally we'd be able to do that. So we need to think of a way forward. Clearly, the safety net and the bottom line is what's recommendation 1.2 is the delegation to the chief officer and in consultation with the chairman. It's only in consultation with the chairman. Chairman's got no power whatsoever, but we need that as a backup. So, but the question is, and I'll be guided by you folks, do we want to insert in there, if possible, or appropriate wording, if the papers are available in time, we have a meeting on the 30th of March to consider it. I mean, I did try that. I'm thinking that's less and less likely, but at least it gives us an option, and maybe we'll know by the 20th of March. If that's not feasible, we won't do it. We can't say we will do it, but that's the only other option. We must have that final safety net about delegating down to the officer in consultation with the chairman. But if members wanted to try for the 30th of March, my view is it's fairly unlikely, and I don't want to put Maria on the spot again, but I think it's fairly unlikely, but I'm prepared to do it if unless Richard tells us there's something we can't do, that we provisionally say we'll meet if that's legally possible, if we get the papers by a certain date. Hal, welcome. Richard, sorry, I've put you on the spot a bit, haven't I, with that?
Okay, no problem. So what this committee could do, if it's minded to do so, is essentially accept the verbal update from Maria today and resolve that in the event the papers are available, a special meeting of the Audit Committee can be held before the 31st of March, and in order to sign off the finalised statement of accounts and letter of representation, if they are available. And also then, in the event that the statement of accounts and letter of representation are not finalised by the 31st of March, authority is then delegated to the Executive Director of Finance in consultation with the Chairman of the Audit Committee to sign and approve the aforementioned documents. So that would be 3 resolutions in all, in line with Denise's report. So there are 2 options there for members to consider effectively, and anything else that anybody else may wish to bring forward.
No, I think that's useful. Well, I mean, we don't need to put a date. That's handy to know. I mean, none of us are going to want to meet on the 31st, and it'd be quite unfair for our officers to do that. So the realistic deadline is the 30th. But what's the view? Do we want to say if the papers arrive, if we don't need to put a date, but the date is going to be around about the 20th of March, we're going to need to know and have them by then, in my opinion. But if we can say if the papers are available and it's feasible, we'll try and meet before the 31st of March to deal with it. Do we want to try that?
Yeah, I would like to, yes.
Yes? Yeah?
Nothing to lose.
Well, it is. It's a bit of a pain having a date, so when you never know you're going to be there. Are we content to try that? Okay. So I need to put that as a proposal. So I'm sort of tempted to say I proposed the advice that Richard gave us is we say we'll have a meeting, and I'll leave this to you, Richard, to word properly. We will have a meeting if we get the papers in time. We'll try and do it before the 31st of March. And I think we should say before the 31st of March, we'll have a meeting of the Audit Committee. If they're not received in time, then we go on to 1.2, which is that, I won't read it all out, that we delegate authority to approve and sign the statements 2020 and letter of representation 2020 to the Executive Director of Finance and Section 151 officer in consultation with the Chair of the Audit Committee. So if we can have a meeting and do it properly ourselves, we will. If we can't, we've got that cover of the delegated powers to the officer. I'll put that as a proposal. So would someone like to second that? Tony, is that you seconded it?
That's your proposal. I'm more than happy to second the Chairman.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. You're coming and going on your sound.
If that is your proposal, I'm more than happy to second it, Mr. Chairman.
Are we content that we'll try that? If you show
Yes.
of hands, please. Okay. Well, we'll try. Thank you. Thank you for that advice, Richard. I'm sorry that we've left it uncertain for you too, which I appreciate is not a good place to be. And thank you, Maria. We understand, you know, you wouldn't want to be here either, but it is a snag. Okay, well, with that resolution passed, we'll move on to hopefully the more comfortable. And thank you, Maria. I know that you've got to rush off to another meeting, so don't feel you have to stay. You're very welcome, but I understand if you need to move on.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm okay till past, but then I will. But thank you, and thank you to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Item 7, internal audit. Anand is here. Would you like to take us through, Anand, please?
Thank you, Chair. If I can go straight to page 19, please. The second box of the report. The report's to the end of February, by the way, and since the last meeting, we've issued a final memo in relation to health and safety. We were requested during the review by management to defer it to next year, but we completed enough work to be able to provide some recommendations on the work we had completed. Hence, it's a memo rather than an assurance report with an opinion. We've also issued a draft report in sundry letters, and we're awaiting management responses. Go to the third box. We've got 3 reviews that are ongoing at the moment, and we've requested more information from officers to enable us to complete these reviews in order to form opinions which would feed into the annual head of internal audit opinion. We're expecting to get that information fairly soon, with 3 weeks to go to the end of March. Go to the next page, Chair, page 20. This shows a total number of recommendations that were due by the end of February, a total of 109, of which 103 had been implemented and 6 were pending implementation with revised implementation dates to the 31st of March. More detail is further on in the report. If I move on to page 21, it actually lists the work to date against the audit plan.
There's no numbers on some of these things.
There is on the left-hand side. Well, they've got their own number and they've also got a sequence number on them.
All right. Well, it's fairly clear, and I know where I am.
I'm nearly there, yeah. So page 21, our performance against the annual plan year to date, Chair. And finally, on pages 22, 23 and 24, it just details the outstanding recommendations and the progress so far against them and the revised implementation dates. Chair, that's the report. I'm prepared to take any questions, please.
Thank you. I must say, considering the circumstances we've all been in for the past 12 months or so, which we've touched upon before, the fact that out of 109 actions, there are only 6 outstanding and 103 implemented, I think is pretty good going. So any questions or comments on the internal audit report? Silence. Wow. Silence means assent. Well, that was fairly quiet. In which case, all we need to do is to note the contents of the internal audit progress report. Thank Anand for all his work over the year, and wish everyone well in the future. Do I a show of hands that we're content with that? Thank you. Thank you, Anand. So that moves us on to the quarterly performance report from Jeff, please. Would you like to outline your highly readable report, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and
Just,
thanks.
excuse me, Chairman. I think Hal's been trying to say something to us for some time, and as he's
Who has?
muted, we haven't had a
Howell?
word.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, he hasn't.
I can't. I can see your tie, Howell. I can't see anything else. It's very nice.
No, but my wife's just coming back from hospital, so I'll be away for 5 minutes.
Oh,
Okay.
no, fine. Yes.
Want to remute him, Richard? Good man. In case we have the door slamming or something.
Yeah. Right. Sorry, Jeff. Back to you again.
So thank you, Chairman. It's the first time somebody's walked off just before my item, so hopefully
Hadn't
it's
even
not.
started.
It won't be the last, I'm sure.
Indeed, no. This is my regular performance and risk update to all as members. I'd refer you to section 2 for a summary of the content of the report. It focuses very much on performance exceptions, which are outlined in section 2. Obviously, the risk section is, as it's always been, risks have been very carefully managed at a leadership level, as set out in the matrix. So I don't intend going through it. I just welcome any questions and comments that members may have.
Right. Questions or comments, and do bear in mind it's the leadership risk side of it that is what we're responsible for. But I'm sure Jeff will be only too happy to answer any other questions or comments. Tony.
When you're looking at the business rate one, to me that's quite a concern. Now, I can understand something that the chair said a few minutes ago. We've been affected by the pandemic. But what is the effect of a 94% target, so which is 6% off anyway, down to a 79.94 actual? We got a big hole somewhere in the financials as a result of that, or am I misreading it?
I'm kind of sensing that Denise, sorry to put you on the spot, Denise, you may be better to answer this one than me, if you don't mind.
Can you just clarify that for me, because I'm just struggling to hear.
Me too.
Okay.
I can't always hear you, Tony. So which page are you referring to?
Okay, I'm referring to, I lost it, item 2.6, business rate collection. And what is concerning me is the target was 94%, so that's 6% down as a starter. Well, we came in at 79.9%. So has that left a financial problem somewhere? Or am I misunderstanding?
I think it's a gap that's closing all the time with every government announcement of further relief schemes. What we're having to do is reappraise the situation. So the gap is closing. That was the situation at the end of December. It has improved since then, and we'll get the true position in a week or so's time. So we're doing everything we can to close the gap and also maximise the help that we're getting from the government for it. I don't know if Denise can add anything to that.
Because we're looking at Q3, remember? There's another quarter to go yet.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the grants coming through, a lot of businesses have been closed in that respect. A lot of grants have been coming through. And I think Jeff's right in that sense that the position really has been unfolding during the year. It's not an absolute dire position that we're in by any means, but it's not quite as good as we would have expected in previous years, really around the COVID pandemic going on.
So, Denise, where does that leave us when we close the books at the end on the 31st of March? If that money is not being collected, where does that deficit go?
That will still remain on the accounts, and that will be recorded in all the statement of accounts. The deficit still remains there, and that still can be called on in future years and collected. So at the moment, we're struggling to be able to collect some of that money and pursue that, with the courts being shut as well. So it's still there, it won't disappear by any means.
But there's two parts to what you just said. Obviously, if we can collect it in 6 months' time, that's fantastic. But we've closed the books for SNC. Does that carry over then as a deficit into WNC?
It's still reported, certainly in the SNC accounts, for the position at the moment for the 2021 will be reported. In terms of if that's feeding into collection fund, that will still then feed through into the West position going forwards.
I think that's what I was going to add about the collection fund members. Obviously, it's an ongoing process. So although we kind of draw a line, as it were, in this year's accounts, we still continue to pursue that debt and for as long as it takes going into the new unitary, and the team will be just as focused on collecting the arrears past the 1st of April as they have been up until the 1st of April.
I'm just looking at it from an accounting point of view, though. So we end up with a deficit on the 31st of March, which is then closed. We then want to continue to collect the money. Is there still a deficit from April the 1st, or does it become a credit with no expense against it? I.e. an upside.
Or is it written off?
It's not written off. No, if there's monies outstanding to them, then from them, then that's still pursued and that still feeds through. There's nothing written off anywhere in that sense.
I think it's being confused by the South Northants, West Northants position. Yeah. I mean, normally, if this was it won't be a normal year, but if we were South Northants Council was continuing, then those rates would still be pursued beyond the following financial year. It's another impossible question, really, maybe, but how much does that represent? So if we're 14% down, how much is that in money that we're down?
I can check for you and come back to that answer.
Yeah, so sorry, it was an impossible question just put out of the blue. But yeah, so I mean the issue would remain the same, and I'm guessing the business rates would still be pursued until such time as businesses went bust and no longer existed, and then we'd need to think of something else. Sandra.
Yeah. Well, just to say though, I should think ours are probably the least amount that's in arrears compared with Northampton Borough, because I should think their rates are quite different from ours. So I don't think it would be a huge crowd, and we don't have all the business rates in any case, do we?
No, and I'm guessing, as Tony's point, in accounting terms, it would remain a credit until we write it off.
Yes.
and I think it's important to remember that writing it off is an absolute last resort. Yeah. We continue to pursue it for as long as it takes. When those businesses get their annual business rate bills, or literally in the next few days, it will have the arrears shown from last year, and we'll be chasing last year's into the unitary. The new team will be chasing the arrears. As we all know, Belinda Green is the assistant director for the new team going into West Northants, so she's got that link and that history with SNC, and she'll be very keen to recover what was due to SNC before it moved into the unitary.
Very good person. She is a very good person.
Yeah, and I think it's an achievement to have got almost 80% in the current climate, frankly. Okay, any other questions or comments? No, thank you. Well, we're asked to note the report and review the leadership risk register, which we have duly done. Thank you. So moving on then to item 9, summary of achievements. Denise, do you want to go through this with us, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's an achievements report just highlighting what we've gone through with the Audit Committee during the last year. So we picked on key services reported to yourselves for internal audit, external audit, corporate fraud. and Treasury Management. And just trying to give you some of the highlights of those reports during the year of everything that we've signed off for those areas. And I think that's remembering the achievement is over and above the business as usual that we've delivered. And it's with the COVID pandemic going on and also the OGR as well. So I think it's really been quite an exceptional year, and yet everything has been delivered as well in addition to.
Thank you. Well, you're too modest to say, but I'm going to say, I'm sure members will support me, is we've got and had an outstanding finance team. And I think congratulations are due to the whole team and to internal audit and indeed the fraud side of things, because I think it all shows an effective and efficient authority. And when you think that we've pretty much managed business as usual through these, through all the uncertainties of the reorganisation, which we couldn't do until we'd unpicked the Cherwell merger arrangement, and then the pandemic on top of that. I think we've been very, very fortunate to have such efficient and effective finance-related staff. So I'd like to record our thanks and congratulations to them all for doing an outstanding job. And, you know, we stand comparison, I would say, no hesitation in saying, with any other authority. And I think we've done remarkably well. And you've made our job as an audit committee easy. So that's why we won't go back there, but that's why it's so frustrating when our accounts have been done and dusted for months and we're ready to roll, that we haven't been able to sign them off through, you know, no fault of ours. So I've said what I'm sure members think, but I'll throw it open if any members got questions or comments. Tony.
I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, whether you should make that as a formal vote of thanks, which if you do, I'm more than happy to second.
I thought that's what I'd just done, actually.
Okay, which case
proposal, I'm quite happy to do that.
Okay, in which case I'm more than happy to second it, because I think a fantastic job has been done.
Okay, I can't see any other hands up. So,
I agree.
Hal, yeah. So, yeah. I mean, that's unanimous. Richard, do you want to guide us as to how we should do this rather pleasant task?
Sorry, Chairman, I was just going to ask who was proposing. I've got Councillor Baggott-Webb as the seconder. Yourself, is it?
Yeah, that's a proposal. Yeah, I should have made that clear. I'd like to propose a vote of thanks and congratulations to our outstanding, say, finance team, and that includes the audit, and as I say, in the effective fraud unit that we've
absolutely
to. Although I'm not sure they're ours. I'm looking at Rob, but they're sort of shared with Oxford, really, aren't they? But we'll take credit where we can. I'm not above stealing credit, but I do think our finance team have been outstanding, and I would like to record our thanks and congratulations to them.
Yeah.
And that's unanimous, clearly. Sandra.
Just like to say that I'm very pleased that Belinda has got the job, and as David, you probably know that we acquired Belinda from Northampton Borough in any case, so it was under my watch. So I'm very pleased that she's made huge steps forward when she came and joined us, and I think our Revs and Bends team over the years have done exceptionally good work.
I can second that very much easily, Sandra, because I think she's a very great girl. She is a very good girl.
Yes, I don't think we quite need to put them in those terms, Hal, otherwise we'll get into trouble.
At yesterday's meeting, if you'd said
well,
that.
Exactly. So if we could add in, we didn't sort of mention Revs and Bends, but as we've heard from her consistently at various meetings about the situation on Revs and Bends, I think it would be appropriate perhaps to add that in, if others agree, Chairman.
I'm happy to include that in the proposal, as long as I'm slightly wary, because by doing that we might miss someone out that we don't mean to. But
we'll say everyone.
Poor old Richard, are you happy to minute that? Make sense of that?
No problem, Mr. Chairman. I've got some words that I can employ to confer the points that have been made. That won't be a problem.
Splendid, thank you. And I'm sure that Democratic Services will be thanked elsewhere. This is Audit Committee, so we're looking at finance. Okay, well, thank you. Any other questions or comments on that? In which case, we'll move on to the review of the committee work plan, which shouldn't take too long, should it?
Big party, I think, Chairman.
Well, we might have a work plan because we may have another meeting, but other than that, we finished, folks.
Yep.
It'd be nice to actually draw a line under it for 1920 and say we really finished. But the work programme is the provisional meeting on whenever it is, the end of March, if and when we get the papers. So that's the work programme. Are we content with that, folks?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the exclusion of the press and public.
Oh dear.
And so, as we've got reports that contain exempt information, under paragraph 7 of part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, we do go into ask the public and press to leave the meeting, and we'll go into a private session.
You have to stop the live stream.
Yeah, I'll let you know when the webcast is off. Chair, I just need your confirmation that everybody agrees with that resolution to exclude.
Yeah. So can we, Sandra, you seconded that. Thank you.
Yes.
It would be helpful if people didn't all shout in about cutting off the live stream till we've finished.